Amazing. So I think we are live. I'm hoping we are live. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Excited.
Absolutely. For those who do not know, we are leading LMF Talks via LinkedIn Live. And today we are talking about diversity, inclusion, belonging, and everything that encompasses those topics and words. And I thought I don't know anyone better to bring on than Alyssa.
Thank you.
So Alyssa, before we begin, I'd love for you to just do a quick introduction as to who you are, what you do, and why DE&I is such an important topic for yourself. And for those who are already commenting, so Mesh and Anjum, I see you, send through your questions and we will make sure that we get them answered.
Absolutely. So my name is Alyssa. I'm a marketing, diversity, and inclusion consultant. And why is this work so important to me? I mean, in some ways, I think being born into a Welsh and Nigerian households, growing up in the Philippines, in the States, in Tunisia, and then here in the UK as well. In some ways, I think I was kind of predestined to be doing this work because I'm just so used to having that kind of multi-culti upbringing and conversations about culture, race, people, place, and space were kind of just like my daily bread and butter.
And it brings me to a really key question. So a lot of the DI work that you and I do together, we always ask the question, or we try and ask the question, when is the first time you saw race? Or when is the first time that you identified yourself as X, Y, or Z? And I guess to your point, you've always known it. And I think to my point, I've always also known it. But there's a lot of people that we talk to within our workshops, within the support, where people don't know it, right? And where other people don't know what they should be saying, what they should be doing, why it even matters. I mean, I did a workshop a couple of months ago, and one of the men who attended, they said that they didn't know they were white until they went to university and they went to a club.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
And what does that mean for you?
I mean, in some ways I get it, and also credit to you. I think that if you create a space that's safe enough for somebody to lean into that good old Brene Brown value of, being vulnerable and share that with you, I think that's something to be celebrated. So big up to you on that. But I also feel that some of us have to have these conversations sooner, rather than that we don't all have the luxury or the perhaps privilege of being able to sort of find these things out in passing. When we go to university in the big city, or when we're, I don't know, out in the club. I think especially for families of color, I mean, definitely in the States, but I think here in the UK too, whether it's conversations about, how to behave in front of authority or safety, I think these conversations happen a lot sooner. And parents are almost like looking out for it when they've got Black and brown kids, because they know that sometimes different things are happening to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also comes to your point, we're not born racist. We're not born to discriminate. It's very much what we're socialized into. It's not like the first thing you learn as a child or a baby is how to be rude to your neighbor, right? I think that's not the reality. It's family, it's friends, it's, feedback. It's people that you're putting yourself into these positions, which often isn't fair. I think my point being is, today, as I suggested or kind of mentioned to you before, I hadn't quite realized that it's been a whole year since the tragic murder of George Floyd, and of course all the consequences that kind of were made, that everything that was possible at the back of it, right? So the question we're answering today, has anything actually changed? And it was just more from a wider DE&I perspective, but also this time last year, businesses were like pledging back squares and saying, we're going to invest X amount into companies, we're going to do DE&I efforts. And today you and I both know that they still don't have the budgets, they don't have the capacity, it's not a priority. So I guess my question to you is, do you think anything has actually changed? And for those who are joining us, do you think anything has actually changed as well?
I mean, heavy question.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the show. Just a couple of light topics. Do I think anything has changed? I mean, I think we'd have to break it down, right? Because it's so broad. What is anything and who is asking, and changed for whom? Who's doing the change? Who's receiving the change? So I think it probably depends on who you ask. But I mean, like you doing this work every day, I am hopeful. I think maybe I'm an endless optimist, but I do think things have changed. Because I remember what it was like. I mean, how long have we both been working in tech and startups? Probably coming up on maybe 10 years now. And yeah, and I just feel like for the longest time, it was just this kind of, there was so much doubt. And anytime we were experiencing issues, especially for me and whether it was my marketing work kind of before kind of doing D&I in a fulsome sense, I was oftentimes made to feel that I was imagining things or that I was imagining that certain experiences were happening to me or around me or to people like me in relation to my race and gender, and almost kind of being gaslit. Like, that's not really what happened. Maybe you're just too political, or, you've got these things on your mind and it's not on everyone else's mind. And I kind of felt that sense for the longest time. But I feel like in recent years, and especially in the last year, I kind of feel like there's been a general wake up in business at large, but also in the tech sector, which we do so much of our work in, where it's kind of woken up a little bit and been like, oh, maybe tech is racist. Like, maybe
absolutely.
Like, maybe our engineering teams don't have to be so homogenous. Because what these companies are saying, even though they don't always realize they are, is that if only people that they have that are doing these roles look a certain way, that only people that look like that can do that.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping, we have so many people watching. I'm hoping that they're taking that content away. And I just want to pick up on something that you said, your experience, your lived experience was often said as imaginary. I mean, the race report that came out in the UK that, established the UK as the role model and that institutionally racism doesn't exist. Now, we don't have to unpack that. But the point I'm trying to make is there was a statement that came out from representatives from the UN after to say, this report basically is suggesting that the lived experiences of African-American, especially African-American women, or sorry, African British, I don't know where American came from, but African British women or African British generally kind of as a community, that they are imagined. Yes. And they're not imagined. You're taking away their reality. You're taking away what really exists, what their experiences are. And I don't know about you, because I obviously can't speak on behalf of the Black community member. But as a South Asian woman, I know that I've had to sense check myself so much over the last few years. And I've mentioned that to you as well. And it's been a really taxing process to learn, unlearn, rewire, and to be like, wait, what I was maybe brought up on wasn't what I should have been brought up on. And actually, racism exists within our own community. And what should we do about that? And rather than me pointing fingers, what am I doing to have the conversations with my own family, my own friends, my colleagues? And it really is about, that I in inclusion is about reflecting on yourself first and then going out and being like, this is what you can do as a company. This is what you can do better. And Aditya shares a great question. What are some of the things that you can do to harness a culture of diversity and inclusion at your workplace? Like, what are some quick wins that you'd recommend?
Oh, good question. I mean, I think this might sound simple, but I think just practicing doing it in conversations can be a really big shout. Because I mean, something that I've noticed a lot is, and this isn't me saying that big full-blown policies and strategies and everything aren't amazing, but I think if you can just try to focus on the micro, focus on you, and just showing up on the daily, whether that is, having fireside little kind of ask me anything chats in the office, or, because I feel like sometimes we do these shares where it's like share a new skill or something you've learned. And sometimes teams have these things kind of on Fridays or whatever. But I would love it if we'd saw more of those kinds of informal community conversations happening around culture and around inclusion, and kind of starting in that small sense, because that's how we get to know each other. And I think we're not taught to bring identity to work. Oftentimes we're taught to leave it at home. This idea that I have a me at home,
yes,
and a me with my family, or code switching, or a me at work. And I think the more that we start to sort of blur those lines between one of them to just you and me by having these conversations, the more we can become more acquainted with showing up as our full authentic selves at work. So I would advise talk to people more and give people platforms to do so.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And just to echo that, it's, simply what we're saying, or what extension of what Alyssa's saying, is just ask people how they are, right? Ask them how they're doing, how their day is, more about them. what are you celebrating? What are you not celebrating? Why are you a vegetarian? Why do you enjoy, certain music? Like, let's just get to know each other more of a human sense rather than a workday sense. And you mentioned code switching. Now, actually, loads of people don't know what code switching is, right? So I guess we use it because we're DE&I coaches. We use it in our day-to-day, but do you mind explaining slightly, if you can, what code switching is? Maybe like in an example.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of what the, I guess, diplomatic thing it is.
There's no diplomacy on my LinkedIn, so you can just be
no diplomacy on this live video.
As raw as you want. People are ready for that. But I guess, sorry, I interrupted. Go for it.
That's okay. I mean, for me, I feel like it's like when we have there's like different sides of ourselves that we feel comfortable sharing in certain spaces that we think are safe or not. So I think for me growing up, code switching, I didn't even realize it was a thing really until like later, like being Black in the workplace. And then I was like, oh, whoa, it's a thing. But I think even just growing up with just biracial families, there was like a way that we would talk with our family, in Wales, whether it was even just slipping into the local kind of, sound of how my family to sound when they're talking about living on Hilltop. And
I've never heard you with like a Welsh accent before.
And you kind of slip into it because it's like, otherwise we seemed like these, like, just so foreign from our own family because we were like, and like the kind of accents and it was so othering. Or like when I'm, with my uncles and aunties in the village in Nigeria, and if I'm sounding like this, I'm not necessarily fitting in the same way. So you might be dropping into the like, and like, using like the local. So I think for me, code switching was just a way of fitting in different environments and trying to like adapt fast.
Yeah.
But I didn't actually realize that this was kind of a crucial or helpful life skill in like the London workplace, where it's like sometimes you feel that you can't do the full expression of your brownness, of your Blackness, especially when you're in, or even kind of your femininity in some ways, when you're in spaces that are dominated by identities that don't fit you in.
Yeah.
And you feel like there's that little bit that you're holding off, whether it's, I don't know, not putting your jollof rice in the microwave because like you don't want there to be comments on the smell of your food, or stuff like that.
Even that comment, even the fact that jollof rice and food and the smell and so forth, it very much is about, like you've said, the smell, the comments, I'm not racist because I have an Indian friend, or you must love Indian food because you are XYZ, or where is that smell? This is not. I know. I know as a young child, and as a professional, there's been certain foods at home that I've been very reluctant to take into work because of that smell. But then, yet when we go to like a team social and you're going to an Indian restaurant, it's completely fine, or like a brown or Pakistani restaurant, right? But at work, it's like. That's important. It's
like the context in which your identity is appreciated or allowed, and the context in which it's like inconvenient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to code switching, I personally only realized that I was code switching a couple of years ago. And before I get into it, I'm going to kind of read out what Sathya said. Sathya says, code switching was made obvious to me at uni when I was with my friend speaking with a full Aussie accent, when my parents called my mobile after my friend said that was the accent. I speak with a Sri Lankan accent, use English with my parents, but never really thought about it. Absolutely. And I always say, I always tell people the story is that I've been in a workplace where I was made fun of my accent, because when you talk to somebody who may be native to yourselves, or heritagely, I might talk to my parents or somebody that may come from a similar background, you can't help but not put it on. But I come from like an estate or a council estate, talk slang, so if someone else is using certain words, I may do so too. And there was also often the comments of, you're uneducated, and it's like, you're not uneducated because you are code switching, because you're navigating the paths, because you're trying to be yourself whilst fitting in. To Satya's point, it's very much, this is just what we do. And the fact that someone's making us aware of it, actually it's hypocrisy in that same sense, because I know a couple of years ago, actually, there was a one of the royal kids, they were in the papers to be like, oh, this, like under 3-year-old, under 5-year-olds know 2 languages. Wow, they know 2 languages. And I'm just sitting there. as with so much of the world, being like, but we know 2 or 3 languages.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not my fault that Urdu is not like an important language in the UK, or not established as like a GCSE or something you should know, but we know 2 languages, we know 3 languages, we're not at the front of the papers. Like, it's not, it's not as big of a deal, but for people that are living it every day, it's not taken into consideration. And yet for those who are going outside the norm, it is. And I think for me, code switching is, today I'm having this discussion, this morning I had a workshop, then I go back into my business hat, then I have another workshop, and today I talk about imposter syndrome. So I'm like, I've just gone from 5 different personalities in the space of 8 hours. But what companies don't realize is that's why investing in D&I is really important, because you cannot have your people code switching from building software to then running the D&I efforts, to then looking at financial spreadsheets, to then doing the marketing, because you need someone that is really focused on what they are doing. And from a marketing perspective, obviously you work with a lot of businesses. Why is it so important for them to have diverse, inclusive, and kind of vocal representation?
Oh, good question. I mean, I think a lot of the time we see these things as separate. Like, even to your comment just then about switching between marketing, business, and finance, and like software engineering hats. I actually think these things have so much more in common than we oftentimes allow them to. So for me, I kind of went from marketing to D&I because I was like so used to being the only like woman or person of color, or both in my case, in so many of the marketing teams that I was working with. So then I kind of like inadvertently felt like I had to do something on the kind of D&I front. And then I realized how much I enjoyed it, and that we shouldn't necessarily overburden people or like the person of color on the team to then all of a sudden be in charge of like people and culture, right? It should be on all of us to contribute to this, unless of course that's what that person wants to do, but I digress. But part of why I think it's so important to merge these things is that there are so many organizations out there that are doing great work on the inclusion front, I think, but it's not necessarily being communicated, whether that's internally or as a brand externally. So I think there's a massive marketing opportunity, not just in terms of like sales and like, oh, look at us with our black squares, let's do this thing that makes us look good, but actually as like a beacon of hope for other companies, like talking to the world on their platforms about their fails as well as their successes, whether it's people policies that they've had to completely revamp, or people policies they've had to completely burn down and build anew. Because we need to see the ins and outs, like the dark, the dirty, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, but unlike other spheres, we don't have there's no D&I handbook, right? It's not like agile or a framework where we're all like, oh yeah, this is just better. Like, this is better than waterfall. Like, let's just do that. And we can just follow this thing and get it right. Like, there's no one way to do D&I. So I think the more that people are using their marketing platforms, whether it's social media, whether it's content on their websites, whether it's videos, to share with people what they think is going well, but also where they think they've missed the mark, because that can be, we don't all have to make the same mistakes as each other. So I think the more that we kind of open up our books and let people know, because this stuff is hard, right? If it was not hard, we would have figured it out by now, and you and I wouldn't have a job.
I mean, absolutely. If it wasn't hard, we would have no employment. So yes, absolutely.
We would have figured this stuff out by now.
Absolutely. And Cheryl says, spotlight your staff on your internal, external site. She's also shared a great YouTube video from Big Mouth on Netflix around code switching. So really good. Thank you so much for sharing. But absolutely, I mean, to your point, in terms of marketing, representation is key, but also you spoke about it earlier, is I want to be able to see who I'll be working with. I want to know who my colleagues may be. I want to know what they look like, where they come from, what their hobbies are. I want to know that I'm not being hired because I'm the only in the room, but equally the only in the room, to your point, should not be responsible for the D&I efforts, because I already know what's up, right? Like I am the one who is discriminated, or the one that is oppressed, or an oppression maybe is like a harsh term, or the one that understands the different kind of, switching that one needs to do. The D&I efforts or sponsorship really needs to come from those who are different to the diverse, so those who are diverse in themselves, and bring it all into one. What I don't agree with is I don't agree with diversity as non-white. Absolutely not. Everyone is diverse. So panels that have like all brown people or all black people, they're not diverse either, right? Like that's in my mind, Diversity comes from literally having a variety of experiences, people, perspectives on the floor, sharing, caring, showcasing, and to your point, failing and succeeding together and growing. So just to kind of summarize, has anything actually changed? Yes, it has changed, not fast enough, not smooth enough, but it definitely means that we can have this conversation right now, and it can be raw and it can be real, and actually we can be really honest, and we can talk about our experience and we can give advice. It means that people are commissioning us to do work, to come in, to be consultants, to audit, but also it means that your lived experience is now being taken more seriously, which is far more important, right? Which on reflection probably wouldn't be. Aditya says, how do diversity inclusion benefit organizations? And what I'd like to end with and summarize is, if DE&I organizations could do 3 things today, 3 tiny things that will immediately support their DE&I efforts, Alyssa, what would you recommend?
Oh, what 3 things?
3 things, but let's answer Aditya's question first, and then we'll go into that to summarize. So how do diversity inclusion benefit organizations? Well, through the LMF network research, what we found, less than 50% of people actually know what diversity inclusion means. And yet 95% believe that there is bias in hiring recruitment, and 100% are being asked odd job interview questions. So DE&I, just on those 3 examples, 1, creating an equitable workforce. 2, ensuring that, hiring recruitment efforts are equitable, are fair, are productive, and able to reduce the cost of hiring recruitment, yet retain your diverse talent for much longer. So that could be anything from blind CVs to external interviews to auditing exercise. And lastly, odd questions. No one wants to go to an interview and be asked things like, are you married? Where's your kid? Are you going to have a kid? When do you plan on settling down? These are real questions that predominantly women are asked. And as myself in an interview round, I've been asked constantly, are you going to get bored?
Yeah.
When
move back to where you came from?
Yeah, exactly. Are you going to move back to where you came from? Like, how are you going to manage the commute? Do you have any disabilities? And it's like, I don't want those questions. I want questions about my work, my graft, my effort, and what I can contribute to. So DE&I efforts will increase retention, increase happiness, increase productivity, increase profits. And why do businesses exist? Well, they exist for money, right? So if there's any other case, it's bring on diversity inclusion, because it will make your revenue increase. It will generate the work and the income that you need. And then it will absolutely smash what you need to do. And we do the work with Hustle Crew, we do the work with YSYS, we do that independently. There's a lot of organizations that we're supporting or we're supporting through, which just means it's super important. So yes, Alyssa, what is your any kind of response to that question? I appreciate I kind of went on a tangent. And then what are the 3 things that companies can start doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of, I think you've nailed so many of them there, but just building on that, I think that the more that, so whatever your organization is trying to do, presumably, they're trying to engage with some sort of an audience, right? Maybe that audience is even global, so diverse in its very nature. So I think one of the key areas that diversity and inclusion and investing in it can actually help businesses or organizations is that if you have more people represented at the drawing board, the better able to serve your diverse communities you will be, because you won't be testing in production, so to speak. You won't be realizing, by the time you're in your final sprint, this product doesn't work for half of your demographics, or wouldn't work in this localized community, or wouldn't work in this country office, because you will have had people from those places represented in those conversations where you're trying to map out and plan your builds. And I think we see, as you and I especially, so much kind of comms fails, whether it's like, brands getting, the adverts wrong, even the biggest companies in the world, whether it's like Pepsi or, not to kind of poke at specific examples. But I think that the more that we have more rich and diverse voices represented internally, the more that will come across externally, which means you're better serving your customers or your clients, which is exactly what you're there to do. So beyond it being like the right thing to do, I think, it also definitely makes business sense as well.
Absolutely. And Cheryl kindly posted that a recent McKinsey report revealed that companies who focus on the most ethnic and racial diversity are 36% more likely to have financial returns and are above their industry. This is also relative and very similar to reports released by BCG, Forbes, and another McKinsey case. They say that profits can be increased by 17%, productivity by 23%. Those stats really do count. What are 3 things that companies can start doing today, Alyssa? What would your, feedback be before we start wrapping up?
Ooh, well, one of them would be mentoring. And this is something that, humble brag, I would like to pitch LMF for. I've been loving taking part in your mentoring program, but also reverse mentoring. I mean, I think we can learn as much as mentors as we can as mentees. But I think this is a great way of making sure that like knowledge is spread around within an organization. Oftentimes knowledge gets very trapped and siloed within teams or within people or within seniority. And the more we can kind of break down those walls, the more we can all kind of move up and down and across the chain in the way in which we want to. So that could be one thing. Another thing could be, what else would I want companies to try today? Not just go for the obvious choices. So really to be thinking about how bias in recruitment is a thing. So whether it's exploring things like, gender quotas or blind recruitment or, things that might allow them to get more diversity in the door. Do I love the fact that we have to have these things? No. I think if your recruitment has to be blind for people like you and I to have a seat at the table, then there's something wrong with that table. But at the same time, until we figure out how to not do these things, that might be what better looks like. If that's what gets people in the door, let's try it. Like this is our first iteration. Again, like we're on kind of V1 with these conversations of diversity and inclusion. Who knows what we're going to be saying in 5 years or 10 years. So I would say, practice and experiment with different forms that help you be able to measure it. And I think exploring in recruitment is kind of an obvious place where you can see that. But I think less obviously too, even just thinking about the inclusivity of your comms. So not social media that you're putting out, but even how you're running meetings. With the example of the table thing, it's kind of cliche, but true for me. It's like who gets a seat at the table, who gets to be invited back, who gets served food, who gets to speak and not be spoken over. We know that diversity isn't mutually inclusive with inclusion, isn't mutually inclusive with belonging. So you have to work at these different pieces. So I think even looking at how your meetings are taking place with how they're chaired. Does the chair always have to be the same? Are the same people talking? Are the same ideas getting backed by the same people? If so, why? Then why are all those other people, all those other women, people of color, maybe there might be some parallels there. Then why are they in these meetings if they're not getting to speak up and be heard and have those ideas get backed? So I would say, try to look at the kind of rainbow myriad of options that you have, not just recruitment, although that's crucial, but also the day-to-day and how you show up as a team and a brand on your socials and in your meetings too. Make those moments count, and you can start by having the conversations and listening to each other.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much. And I've shared some of that on the comments so everyone can see. I'd also say an extension of that is if you are pledging DE&I efforts, please pledge with an investment. As a DE&I coach, I don't do work for free. And I'm pretty much tired of companies asking any DE&I coach to do work for free. And so that can be a whole different discussion. And so I don't want to go into the depths of that. But if you're serious, then the funds should be serious too. Two, it's don't just kind of wake up one day and think, right, here's what we need to do for DE&I, and it's going to tick that box. Think about the auditing and strategy behind it. Take a moment to really go through your process, clean up your policies. And if you need support on that, absolutely, this is where consultants come in. And 3, ask your people what they want. It's good enough for us to be like, this is what you need, but actually your people are your people. They bought into your vision. They want to work there. They want to be loyal. They want to grow. Okay, ask them what they want. Ask them how they can support you and how you can get involved. Listen to them and take it forward. I think, the one most important thing is listening to others and not dismissing or discounting their experiences or their feelings or their emotions, but maybe putting it into different boxes to say, here's how we can deal with that and here's how we can deal with that. Always remember that there's an intersectional approach. But, it's really about taking that time to get to know that people, your people, the company, and what can be done. So thank you so much for joining. We try and keep this to 30 minutes. Thank you. So final little bits, and I want you to plug yourself. So how can people find you? What do you do? Why should they get in touch with you? And what is your email address? Because that is your real kind of major social outlet, isn't it? Emails.
Yeah. Well, my email and my LinkedIn, I suppose. So if you are watching right now, you can see my name on the screen. If
you're also tagged, so you can just follow Alyssa.
Yeah, you'll find me that way. There's only one of me. There's maybe there's not that many Welsh Nigerians in the world. And then if any of you are watching, please introduce yourselves. I'd love to find my tribe. Why should people engage with my work? Kind of building on the last point you made about intersectionality. That's us. It's also me. It's how I've grown up in the world, and it's definitely my approach to the work. I think thinking about how our identity or experience in one area can be compounded by our identity and experience in another area is a really crucial way to look at it. And it also means that we look at how things can get internalized and not just playing that blame game of it being like this one group or community has to do all the work, when in reality, I'm trying to do what you were saying earlier, like that unlearning, that unpacking, that relearning, that rewiring. So I think that's something that's really, really central to my approach to the work, is the fact that if we're really trying to make the wheels of change spin forward faster, we're not going to get there unless all of us are greasing our elbows and pushing those wheels. So that's kind of my approach to this work. And every day I'm learning, and I hope that anybody that joins me has that attitude and energy as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I encourage everyone to follow Alyssa. I encourage everyone to watch this back, and if you have any questions, tag us, tell us, we can help you. And if you're a company who's looking for support, reach out to both of us, and we're very happy to help and take you on that journey. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone who's watched. I believe that we've had over 80 people watch. No, we've had over 200 views, which is amazing. We've only been live for like 25 minutes, so of course that'll go up. And if you need anything D&I related, we are here to help. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.